Our world is lost in unnecessary fear and hurt. Our systems seem scientifically engineered to make you small, powerless, and always waiting for the next great leader who will fix the problems around us. Worse, we're witnessing neighbor versus neighbor while warfare breaks out around our family tables. But you have access to a spirit, a strength that enlarges and empowers you. Even better, you don't need to wait for the next big movement. You can heal the world. It's time for governance by grace. Welcome to Gracearchy with Jim Babka. Governance by grace. Governance by grace, and who dangles the biggest carrot? How about that? Can we amend it just for one show?
Yeah. Hey, I could use a couple $1 million, so
maybe a couple million.
Maybe.
So the way I understand this, so Joe Rogan is offering to give $2 million to the charity of choice, right, of the winner of a debate that he wants to host on his show. Do I have that right?
Well, close. So he initially offered 100,000 in this situation, and then after other people had heard about this, they started crowdfunding campaign.
Got it.
And there are some very big names that have put their names in the hat. Said, "Count on me to throw in." And last I heard, that was up to $2 million.
Okay.
I've confirmed news report here of $600,000.
Okay, well, going up is good.
Yes.
Charity's going to benefit from this, whatever the NGO is.
Yeah, and it's to the charity of Dr. Peter Hotez's choice.
Right. So Dr. Hotez is one of the debate, should we call him candidates? One of the debaters. Who's the other one?
Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Bobby Kennedy.
Bobby Kennedy. Right. And famously capable of debating anything but the facts, right?
So Robert Kennedy was on Joe Rogan's show, and that's the source of this. Yep. He appears on the show. There's a journalist that writes, I think it was for The Atlantic, and Peter Hotez retweets her article where she's critical of what she called misinformation or vaccine misinformation.
Right. Yeah.
That is saying that Rogan is continuing a pattern of being dishonest in the midst of all this.
No, wait a minute. Hold on a second here. So Joe Rogan is dishonest?
Yes. And his show. Just by the way, Dr. Peter Hotez's position, his official position on misinformation related to viral matters, is that people should be canceled and Homeland Security should be involved in the question. That is his official position. Like they should arrest people.
He has no official position. He's standing on an iceberg in bare feet, man, and sliding downhill.
Yeah. So that's actually his official position. Now, this is an interesting irony of all of this. Dr. Peter Hotez has been on Joe Rogan's show twice as a guest.
Okay. So there's credibility here, right? We're offering him credibility.
So he has, so for people who don't know him, he's kind of a minor figure I don't know if you remember when OJ was on trial, that there were these basically media celebrities that were invented during that era. And basically, if you were watching cable news during the aughts, there were probably 15 people that had shows or were panels or regular guests that came directly from that era. Like that, that was the news cycle every day, OJ all the time, man, it seems so petty at the time, but wouldn't it be cool if that was actually the biggest story in a way? I mean, it's just like we've got other stuff that's like much worse and much more confrontational going on right now. And so they came out of that area. So he's like that. He's like a COVID demi-celebrity. He's like a B-lister, maybe even a C-lister. Okay. And he makes regular appearances on MSNBC and a few other places. He did appear on CNN. He did appear on Fox News. He was getting opportunities to do this. He is a pediatrician who has specialized in childhood immunization issues. That's his background. And he's come on Joe Rogan's show twice. So I think it's wrong to say to Joe, you can only have me on. Like, you only are allowed to hear from me. If you have anybody that disagrees with me then you're a bad guy. Like, wait a minute, you were on my show, right? I mean, so he retweets this tweet and Joe responds the following way. You ready?
Yeah, hit me.
He says, "Can we have lemonade?"
No kidding.
Joe says, "Listen, Peter, I'm going to do two things for you. I'm going to let you come on the show and debate. I'm going to give you $100,000 for appearing with RFK. And secondly, and this is the important thing, I'm going to give you no time limit. There's no time limit to this thing. We will sit and talk for as long as it takes for us to get at the truth together, right? RFK in one chair, you in the other. Let's do this." And that number has grown to 2 million. It's 2 million for his private charity, but Joe started off putting his own skin in the game.
Yep.
I'm going to be saying a couple things, I suspect, today from a Nassim Taleb, Black Swan, anti-fragile perspective here. That's one of the concepts, right? Skin in the game, right?
Well, before we get started on all of that, that's our move. Lemonade is our thing. So, Joe, if you're listening, we'd appreciate a little less than shade over here for offering people lemonade.
Well, listen, if he wants to, I would love to go on his show. That would be a hoot. I could actually sit and talk fighting with him too, although I haven't kept up with it as much the last 2 years as I was previously. But he would be a treat to talk to. I have questions about comedy I would ask. It'd be fun. It'd be a lot of fun.
He seems like a fun host.
Yeah.
But in this case, so I can see his point. He's bringing on Dr. Hotez, who is like the slippery slope of all vaccine scientists. And he's bringing on Bobby Kennedy Jr., who, according to this New York Times article anyway, by Fahad Manjoo. Do I have that right?
Farhad Manjoo.
I'm reading my scribbled notes here, guys, so bear with me. Bobby Kennedy Jr., who also has trouble with the facts. This could be an interesting show, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer it was two other people, right? But we rarely get what we rarely, in these situations, when a moment like this hits, we rarely get exactly what we want. Like, we have maybe an ideal spokesman we'd like to see representing. And in fact, I would like to see two ideal spokesmen. I'd like to see the most steel-manned, rigorous discussion possible. These are two, let's just be blunt about it, very flawed vessels coming to this moment. However, I'll take what I can get, because what we have not had up to this point is an honest acknowledgement of what has happened in this country over the last few years. Yes. The establishment has said proactively, proscriptively, your life should be the following ways. This is how your life will be. You'll be locked in your home. You'll be, you have to wear a mask. You have to shut your businesses down. You have to get this vaccine, or you can't keep your job. We are even looking at taking your phone and turning that into a passport, which will prohibit you from being able to get into certain places. And private actors did indeed utilize that technology and begin implementing
California
it.
did. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, no, this happened all over the place. It happened in New York. It happened on a bunch of places. So the idea that your freedom of association, your freedom of movement, your freedom of speech, your freedom, actually more freedom of press in this case, these things could be limited by edict. This wasn't even done by law. And it was being driven by guys like Dr. Peter Hotez. They all look like him. They all have the same type of pedigree, basically. Although I will give him some credit, because he actually is a practicing pediatrician. Like, he's actually in the field. A lot of the people that were doing this are in something called public health, which does not exist. There is no such thing as public health. Everybody, either you're sick or you're not. I'm sick and I'm not. If you're sick, that doesn't mean I'm sick, right? I mean, that it doesn't compute. Okay, doctors meet patients. That's what they do, and none of this was handled. And there are two things missing in this entire thing. We covered this in a previous episode where we talked about the pandemic. We talked about forgive and forget, if you recall. Pandemic, forgive and forget.
Yep. We
were not treating individuals as individuals. And we were not looking at the complete long-term effects. And so on the latter, I argued that we needed economists. And on the former, I argued that we should trust doctors. And if those two things had been done, if economists had been in the room with these public health officials and real doctors had been allowed to practice as they saw fit with their patients, I say to you with firm conviction that there would have been far fewer deaths in America.
I agree.
And we would not have had the economic consequences that we are presently experiencing.
I agree.
And which are about to get significantly worse.
Yes. significantly. It's happening already. People look at the stories about commercial real estate and who owns the mortgages on empty office towers, and you'll start to get a feel for where the banking crisis is headed. But that's a different show.
Yep, it's a different show.
Let's meet Dr. Peter Hotez. Anything you want to say about him before I roll this clip?
Yes, that he should agree to this debate. That in fact, I actually believe, based on what you're about to see, which is heavy on satire, but includes him really saying the things that he said. We're going to have a little fun with this clip, but he actually should, in all seriousness, take advantage of this debate. I'll make a case for why.
One of the things that we're not hearing a lot about is the unique potential safety problem of coronavirus vaccines.
And then something changed.
Any vaccine released by emergency use authorization by the FDA is an outstanding vaccine.
J&J's vaccine has a risk of life-threatening blood clots.
When you hear the beep, that's the sound of safety.
So don't overthink it. They're both really good. They're all really good vaccines. Get vaccinated now.
You gotta call now.
If you wait, it's going to be really too late to protect your child.
If this was your child, what happens next could make it the worst day of your life.
So even though COVID poses zero threat to healthy children,
Vaccinate your children.
Do the right thing. Be safe and not sorry.
I'm strongly recommending for adolescents to get their 2 doses of vaccine and fully immunized after those 2 doses.
Advanced technology that can help save lives.
This is going to be a long-lasting vaccine. A long-lasting vaccine.
A few moments later.
We're seeing that 2 doses is not holding up well for emergency room visits. It's not holding up well for hospitalizations.
Here we go again.
Everyone's going to need a booster. You need that 3rd immunization.
Triple the amount.
Get that 3rd immunization. The 2 mRNA vaccines were always a 3-dose vaccine. The 2 mRNA vaccines were always a 3-dose vaccine. I've always said this is a 3-dose vaccine. I've always said this is a 3-dose vaccine. This is a 3-dose vaccine.
But I'm not done yet.
That 3rd immunization, the problem is it's not holding up. So we may have to look at sort of innovative solutions.
Oh God, not this again.
A 4th immunization, just to keep them going, to keep the country going. We have to consider some out of the box things. A 4th immunization. A 4th immunization. Get that 2nd boost. A 2nd boost to keep the country going. I've made that recommendation. A 4th immunization.
But I'm still not done.
1 semester later.
Unfortunately, the numbers are starting to trend up again. So the hospitalizations are up. And so the most important message that I have this morning is get your new bivalent booster.
Willie and Lise were saying they got their booster, and I was like, oh, I need to get mine. And then I found out they're talking about the 3rd shot. And is that the bivalent, or is it the 4th booster, or does it matter?
Don't worry so much about the number of.
There's no wrong way to use it.
You have to get it. This new bivalent booster.
You can double or triple stack them.
The new bivalent one is doing a much better job. You have to get a booster.
Yeah.
You need to get this new bivalent booster. That bivalent booster for COVID.
But does everyone ages 12 and older need a booster?
The answer is yes. Yes. And by the way, if you're over 50 and have gotten 2 boosters and more than 2 to 4 months out, you're going to need a 3rd booster as well, a 5th immunization.
5.
I don't think we're going to need an annual booster like flu.
Eventually.
Dr. Hotez supports yearly boosters, just like flu.
But I'm still not done.
It looks as though the boosters are not holding up quite as well as we'd like. And I think our thinking is going to change, and that what's going to happen is every few months we may need another booster.
Perfect results each and every time.
We just could not overcome that massive disinformation.
Oh my Lord. Jim. When does it ever stop? It's like a comedy show.
Yeah. So there's the moment that jumps out to me the most in that whole thing is right when Kevin Hart comes on the screen. He literally gaslit everybody.
Yeah.
Like I never said, you never heard me say, I never said what we just, of course, heard him say, because most people don't walk around. They weren't paying attention to him and keeping the clips, right? I mean, in this day and age, we've got the receipts.
Yep.
And previous to this video, all kidding aside, he was the same on masks. He was just the same guy on the mask question. He was just the same guy on the lockdown questions. Like everything that was part of the establishment line, he was for.
He's totally transparent.
And he didn't stop there. He wanted punishment, literal punishment of people who dissented from the official line. He actually called for and advocated the use of Homeland Security as one of the options. There had to be some method because the methods they were using were not causing people to shut up.
This is where it gets scary for me because this is America. Hello, just in case anybody was wondering. We do have certain fundamental natural rights here. And from someone who was raised in a religious background that had the ability to exclude itself from medical treatment, vaccinations, hospitalizations, by law, it is amazing to me that here we are in 2020 or whatever we were in, where we're legitimately removing those liberties from American citizens. Legitimately. And I'm saying that not because it's the right thing or because it's legal, but because the government felt that it could do it based upon its concern for public safety, whatever that might be, and then threaten us with coercive force if we didn't do it. Why would they just leave us alone? Hey, if we're not going to do it, we're going to die, right? According to the government's idea. Isn't that coercive force enough?
It is, and it's wrong, like on its face. So every time this is really fundamental. This is really fundamental. There's so many things to say here, but this is really fundamental. The principle of human respect, which we also covered in a previous episode, and we'll put both of the episodes we've referenced so far in the show notes, right? Yep. The principle of human respect says that happiness, harmony, and prosperity always decline when people are coerced, stolen from, or physically harmed. Like if you initiate force against them. And the law, the entire law, and the use of it the way it was used during this pandemic, which we didn't have Republican representative government throughout much of this. We had emergency orders being dictated by unelected officials and by governors, and I would consider Mr. Hotez a part of this class. He has relationships with people, close relationships with people in the vaccine community. He had already written a book, right? He'd
written the Bible on this for some people.
And by the way, to counter, a guy named Kennedy in part.
Yes.
So here you've been, and I want to get into why he should debate, but let's start at the most fundamental level and say that it is wrong to coerce, and that it is obvious to me that the coercion has had a backfire effect.
Yes.
Okay.
Big time.
The head of Bayer stands up and says, it was brilliant marketing, you guys. Brilliant marketing when you decided to label this thing a vaccine. We all know it's not a vaccine, but it was brilliant marketing because it helped get more people to trust it and take it.
Right.
Now, if vaccine hesitancy goes up following this event, who do we pin the responsibility on? Well, it's very clear to me where the media wants to go with this. They want to say that all the people who've seen what just happened should not believe their lying eyes. Because the thing about watching Hotez go through that video is you realize that everything that he was saying was undone by his previous statement, or vice versa. Let's say it the other way. Let's say that he said something today, tomorrow it was no longer true.
Yep.
And there's never an apology for this.
No, he never comes out and says, hey, even to say, you know what, it's not, I'm real sorry. It's not going to take two. We're going to need a third. We're going to need a booster. I'm so sorry. This is the way it's gone. Anything like that doesn't exist. Doesn't come out of his mouth.
Being a crony of the state means never having to say you're sorry.
There you go.
Being a crony of the state means never having to say you're sorry. And he's going to be damned if he's going to apologize. There's just no way. And if he has to come on and he has to debate somebody who actually has the chops to go toe-to-toe with them, and that is Bobby Kennedy. If he actually is going to debate somebody who can come on, who's going to have his own set of facts to counter those facts, right? He's actually studied. Like, he's willing. Peter's a gracious guy. He's willing to come on Joe Rogan's show again, even though he's insulted Joe and he's been on there twice. I'll come on your show again, Joe. Just not with Bobby, right? because Joe Rogan isn't living in this world day to day. So he knows that he has a conferred advantage in being able to manipulate. Excuse me. That was easy for me to say.
Yeah.
He knows that he has a conferred advantage of being able to manipulate the conversation in a direction that will favor his outcome. He knows that. And I'll be honest with you. I'm telling you this as somebody who's done, I don't know, 1,000 interviews in my career, has done talk radio. I mean, I know I know how to do it, right? This is not, if you're the only guest and you're meeting with your host, you almost always have a knowledge imbalance with that host. The thing that's difficult about interview is knowing enough to ask good questions of your subject.
Right.
That is very difficult. I'm pleased to say that a couple of the guests that have come on this show have come back to say, wow, I haven't been through an interview like that before. You really were prepared. This is why I'm hesitant to get guests on, because I want to make sure that I really maximize the outcome. I want to ask them really good questions. So that usually is the case. You don't have that ability. Joe's going to give him 2 hours, 3 hours, 3.5 hours to talk, and he'll be able to say whatever he wants. That's not going to happen with Bobby Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy is going to he's going to be able to do two things. He's going to be able to argue because he's got a natural ability as a lawyer and he's got his own opinions and so forth that differ. He'll be able to argue effectively, but he's also going to have his own set of facts. And it turns out that all those facts don't come from invented places necessarily. They're actually science. So now, who's right and who's wrong here? Like, I don't want to put a thumb on the scale. I just simply want the argument to happen. I don't want to say Peter Hotez is right, although, I probably have tipped my hand by sharing with you the fact that, like, look at what he just did, right? There's a credibility problem on his side. But we all know about Bobby Kennedy's credibility problem. That's been well articulated.
Yes.
And in fact, the media would prefer that he not even have a place in this race. They don't want him in any kind of debates. And there are not going to be any debates on the Democratic side as of now. They've all been canceled. They don't want him. They're not covering him. And they're mad. They're absolutely aggravated that he's getting an opportunity to come on the podcasting world because they were the gatekeepers. You had to come through us. And we already decided you shouldn't be running. So what are you doing running?
Well, we talked about the regime media too, and their influence over things is waning. Clearly, this is another case of that. So, other than Joe Rogan gaining from this debate, if it happens, and the MPO who's going to get the money, what does Bobby Kennedy stand to gain from this debate?
Well, first off, I think Bobby Kennedy, whether you think I think Bobby Kennedy's a professional blowhard. Now, I'm a professional blowhard maybe too. Like there's a certain degree with which I do think there's some things he's doing where he's starting to act like a politician right now. But he has an established career in two areas in particular. And one is the vaccination arena.
Right.
And he's opposed to mandatory childhood vaccinations. He's not opposed to vaccinations, to be clear. He's opposed to mandatory childhood vaccinations. And which is now novelly, the dictionary was rewritten to say that that's anti-vax. Maybe he is, but anyway, and the environment. Those are his two areas. He's an environmentalist, and he is not talking as much about his environmental positions during this campaign because of the line that he's trying to walk on these podcasts and trying to get people to cross over from. He clearly wants people who are not Democrats to cross over and vote in the primaries next year. He needs that because the Democratic Party, the establishment Democratic Party, is satisfied with another 4 years or another one, or however many months they manage to get out of Joe Biden before he falls over.
Yeah.
So they're satisfied with that because they know the people that are still pulling the strings. They're basically Obama era people. It's some of the same people are pulling those strings. They know who's really running the show. And so they're comfortable with that. They have an establishment track going. So his insurgent campaign needs to will need some crossover. So he's being careful. He is being a politician right now. He's being careful what he talks about, how he says it, and what he says. He even showed up at a Bitcoin conference. He showed up at the most prominent Bitcoin conference as a speaker. He is trying to definitely cross lines and bring some other people in. So he's not talking about the environment as much during this campaign, even though it's probably the issue that he cares about the most. But he is talking about the vaccine issue because now he has a chance to expose what he knows about, or what he believes he knows about vaccines, and what he knows about Anthony Fauci, which is what the subject of his last book was.
But time out here a second, because it's not the Biden administration that needs to be exposed on this.
Well, he's getting as much publicity as possible, and every time he goes out and makes these messages, he's going to get more publicity.
Sure, I'll give you that.
Peter Hotez is very much. I have no idea how Peter Hotez votes, but let me just tell you two things. Peter Hotez was completely consistent with the Democratic Party line that was going on throughout this pandemic.
Right.
And number two, his most frequent set of appearances by far were on MSNBC, which is the Democrat cable network.
Yep.
So he's comfortable in that environment. That's who he appears to be. And I think that it is really unfortunate that there are people who will want and be rooting for Bobby Kennedy, and there are people who will be rooting for Peter Hotez in this discussion. And what they should be hoping to root for is the truth.
Yes.
Okay.
So can either of these guys get, Bobby Kennedy's got more actual factual information here than Peter Hotez does.
Oh, no, I'm not going to say that. No. I just think on this particular question, Peter has not been honest. His lack of, we just played the clip. He's not been honest on this particular question. But I think it's inevitable in the open forum that Joe's going to allow to occur, and the way that these two guys would end up interacting with each other, that they're not going to just stick to the COVID situation. They're going to end up opening the door to childhood vaccinations. And this is the area where you would basically have the best. This is a practicing pediatrician countering a guy who says that vaccines are most deadly or dangerous to children, especially young children. And so let them lay their facts out in front of each other. What has not been done up to this point is that Bobby Kennedy has not really gotten his public day in court. And he's getting it now through podcasts. But I would argue that there's even been some degree to which he's not gotten it because the people that are interviewing him are not up to the degree to which they would need to challenge him. And by the way, as a debater, he does have one fatal flaw. He's not going to watch this podcast, so I can reveal this. He has one fatal flaw. He has a bad temper. He takes what he's saying very personally. Like I said, he buys his own bull. He will. It is possible. I don't know enough about Peter Hotez, but it is possible. It's not hard to get under Bobby Kennedy's skin. So so these are not the perfect vessels I would choose for this, but this is the moment. Can I say why I think Peter Hotez? Should take this?
I'm curious what your perspective, what we hope to gain from this, other than an airing of some very important facts that have yet to come to light and be discussed publicly. What else are we looking for?
So this is the New York Times position.
Oh, right. Yes.
Okay. And Farhad Manjoo wrote it, but it could have been anybody over there that wrote this article. And he's arguing that Bobby Kennedy is a guy who disregards facts. But we just watched a clip and saw that Peter Hotez is a guy that disregards facts.
Sure.
So we're going to have two people here who are not on a full quest for the truth. I would prefer, for example, if it was John Campbell. So John Campbell is a UK guy who's become very big on YouTube, who started off in the camp that was wanting to do all of the things that the establishment was doing, thought it was necessary. And as he kept pursuing the truth and observing the science and looking at the data, he gradually moved to the point that now he recognizes that all of this was a farce, all of this was a scam, all of it was dangerous. All of it has bad outcomes. And worst of all, when we start getting pieces of data and we start saying, look at this, they go, oh, we better turn that piece of data off. That they keep hiding the information. I would rather have an honest broker like John Campbell sitting in that seat, explaining how he came to his position, challenging somebody like Mr. Hotez and going through his stuff because he knows his stuff, right? I'd rather have an honest guy like that. And on the other side, I don't think I would want Peter Hotez either. I'd like to have somebody who, is capable of maybe changing their mind if they hear a fact that corrects it. It is the gaslighting is especially appalling right? That says something about character that's really not good. So I would like to see people who maybe are more serious, who are more humble, who have shown ability to change their mind when new evidence arrives, sitting on either side of this debate and beginning to have this discussion with one another. Peter Hotez should say yes for number one. There's $2 million on the table. Okay. Pick a charity that's going to upset the heck out of RFK. Give that money to that charity and take the offer. So RFK has to go in knowing that a charity he cannot stand is getting $2 million. Pick one that does something on childhood immunization if you wish. Go ahead. You've got $2 million with which to play. Second, Farhad Manjoo's number one argument in here about disregarding facts, his number one argument is that when he had to debate Bobby Kennedy on a completely unrelated issue where Bobby Kennedy was clearly in the lunacy area.
Yep.
Bobby Kennedy was an election denier in 2004. That's the modern term. They didn't have that term back then.
Yeah.
But he was part of a group of people that said that John Kerry was cheated here in Ohio, and he should be the president of the United States. And it was an organized cabal, and it had to do with voting processes, machines, and various legal people in public office keeping blacks from being able to vote, et cetera, et cetera. And he had basically put together a conspiracy theory, because Bobby's good at that, to say that that John Kerry had been cheated out of the election in 2004. And Farhad ended up debating him. But Farhad went on a show on public radio or wherever it was. I think it was public radio. And it had a time limit, because that's how things worked before we had podcasts. Joe's most important part of his offer. This alone should be worth the price of admission. In fact, let's just put this on the table too. It is the largest audience in America today.
Yes.
Okay. Like there's NFL football. There's more people that view that. Okay. But if we take NFL football off the table, like you want to go to any news show, any commentary program, any discussion of any kind in this country, the largest show where that happens is Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
And then he said, no time limit. No time limit. He explicitly said it in the tweet. No, I'll give you 100,000 and no time limit. 100,000 and no time limit. So you're going to get paid. He's not offering to pay Bobby Kennedy to come. He's offering to pay Peter Hotez to come. And they're saying, we can't do this. Now, I want to steel man their position and say, you're right, because I thought very hard as we were coming to do this episode. Does every crank deserve an opportunity to come on my microphone? Would I owe somebody a debate just because they disagree with me and they threw out a public challenge, right? And the answer is no. And Peter Hotez didn't owe anything to Bobby Kennedy either, except, number one, he sent out a tweet criticizing the fact that he was on a show and accusing Joe Rogan of spreading misinformation, a show that he had twice himself been on. So he already threw the first stone. What Joe is responding to is, okay, you're saying I did this wrong. I'm going to give you the opportunity to come in here and make it right. He doesn't have the right to say no. He already threw out the challenge. He's the one that initiated this challenge.
Yep.
But if you add on top of that the money, you add on top of that the unlimited time to speak, you add on top of that the size of the audience, anybody within their right mind would want to do it if they really believe their case. And you know what? I know Bobby Kennedy believes his case, but I don't believe Peter Hotez believes what he's saying. I don't think the people in the establishment any longer believe what they're saying. I think they recognize that most of what just was played in that video, they've got pastiche excuses for it, but they recognize the truth of it and they don't want to have that discussion.
Yep. It's embarrassing.
Right.
And Hotez, Dr. Hotez, by not agreeing to this, is virtually admitting that he is in the wrong on this, that he knows that he's full of it.
There you go.
Right? What other conclusion can you draw?
I don't think there is another conclusion.
There isn't one.
And this is this is where the angry notes start to come, right? How dare I say such a thing, right? But I think I've been pretty fair and balanced to him throughout this thing. I think I've said he should go. I actually think I even gave him a technique he could use to beat Bobby Kennedy. I explained he's written the book on childhood immunization. I know he has facts. I know he's capable of debating. I know he can come in there. I know Joe Rogan is going to make sure that fair play happens. We know this. We've had enough chance to observe it already.
Right.
I know that the both guests are going to be treated with respect and are going to be given time to talk. They're both going to be given time to talk. And so if one of the things that Bobby does in these situations, because of the time limit, is he does the Gish Gallop. You remember us talking about the Gish Gallop?
Yep. So
he will, this is a conspiracy theory tactic. They will throw so many things out there, and then they will come back and say, well, you just sound angry and you're this and that. They don't have to actually deal with, they throw so many things you can't possibly deal with them, and they don't have to deal with the stuff you came back in response because you're sputtering and you're talking super fast, trying to get as many things as you possibly can, and it doesn't work, right? You feel like you lost when it's all over because you needed 3 or 4 times. Well, you know what? Peter Hotez can say, wait a minute, Joe, you asked a question, but he actually said 4 different things. And I'd like to take each one of those 4 things in order, if we could, please.
There you go.
And he's going to get the time to do that because that's what this new medium finally offers.
Yep.
And
we're way outside the soundbite here. We can
still
spend the time. And he still says no. He still says no.
I want him to debate. That's what I want. I want him to debate. I want this debate. If this is the best debate we can get. Now let's bring this into the big picture. Let's talk about the rest of us. Why does this matter to all of us?
Yeah.
It matters to all of us because we all lived through this experience. And nobody from the establishment has come back and said, and nobody that's been at the top levels has come back and said, I was wrong. I apologize.
In 2 administrations now.
Yep. Because by the way, the first administration knew before they left, we now know they knew where the lab about the lab leak. They even knew the names of patient 0, the 3 patient zeros. They knew it was who, and right. I mean, they knew that it was these 3 guys. Okay, so the Ben Who is the one I remember, because who was first.
So 2 administrations knew about this before today. So this is not this. I mean, I hate to call it a cover up, but I don't know what other words are better, right, Jim?
No, there's a lot of stuff here that it does appear to be cover up, and what should happen in the interest of science, in the interest of, if you do believe that vaccines are good and healthy and positive, and you want to keep that childhood immunization schedule up, then what you should do right now is understand that you have a job to do to repair the damage that's been done. You cannot blame. Let's assume, because this seems to be how the New York Times and Peter Hotez and others are handling this, Farhad, let's assume that everybody who does not take the vaccines is stupid. Let's just assume it. You're just dumb. You're an idiot. Okay? Are you going to make that better by not having the discussion and leaving the impression that you don't have an argument, that there is a reason not to trust you? Are you going to leave all the things that have just happened over the last 2 years aside, or are you going to come in and say, I want to do an honest assessment of what we got right and what we got wrong? And it will definitely include an assessment of what we got wrong. We won't even make excuses for it in some cases. We will say we were just wrong and we've learned something that we will do differently next time. And if that, the only thing I think they learned is that they didn't put the screws on hard enough, soon enough, fast enough. That's what they learned. I don't think they believe in any way, shape, or form that they were wrong about any of this. They won't admit it to themselves. And they're in an echo chamber, so that nobody's actually saying out loud to them. But come on talk to the rest of the public if you want to restore science. So, Bill Nye, the science guy, right?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so I don't know, probably 15 years ago, 13, 15 years ago, I don't remember the exact year, he came on and debated Dwayne Gish, the guy that's the namesake of the Gish Gallop.
The Gish Gallop.
And he runs a museum called the Coercion Museum that's in Kentucky, where they have a real size Noah's Ark out front of the building. Okay. And Dwayne Gish believes that the world was made in a little over 6,000 years ago in 6 days.
Right.
He's what's called a young earth creationist. And Bill Nye A lot of his friends said, you can't go debate this guy. You're giving him credibility. But Bill went and debated him. And I will tell you that unless you came in 100% convicted that Dwayne should win, you didn't come away believing that Dwayne was right. And there wasn't some mass explosion of creationism that followed this event. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, Bill's given him credibility and now everybody's going to the Creation Museum and they've all signed up and they all believe creationism now. That didn't happen. I actually think that you can defang Bobby Kennedy if you're right. The question is, are you? I suspect they're not, which is why I suspect they're not taking up the debate. I suspect that Peter Hotez is much more like the satirical fun we just had with him. I mean, underneath that satire is a line of truth about how he handled things, how he approached this, how he does science.
This flies,
and he doesn't want to defend it.
This flies in the face of everything that we know works, right? You had me read a book about called Boyd, about John Boyd and the OODA loop. This is the way that the Defense Department handles stuff now. This is the way that wars are discharged. This is how we learn from our mistakes and adjust and go back and work it better the next time. This OODA loop is ingrained in all kinds of business processes, from the very simplest ones to
the OODA loop's
Sigma.
The OODA loop's the good part of that. The bad part was his. You got two things kind of going on there. I want to make sure the audience can follow it.
Right.
He was in the Pentagon for a period of time working on building fighter planes.
Yep.
And he found that he had to make a choice, and everybody there in the building did, between having integrity and profiting off of the system. The Pentagon's the world's largest purchasing department, largest purchasing department ever in the history of the world.
This is where I wanted to go, Jim. Thank you.
And they are routinely thinking about padding and keeping their jobs and whatever, and what the public impression is, rather than they are about the truth about whether or not the equipment that they're making is effective, it works, it's built, economically, right? They don't care about any of that stuff. In fact, it's not in their interest to make it economic. They want to blow up the price of it because that's how they make favor with their future employers. Let's be frank about it. They'll go to work for these contractors when their time at the Pentagon's over. And they'll come back lobbying for more money themselves or helping to spend more money from the other side of the equation. This is a constant repetitive cycle. And the instinct of the people who are in the state, the instinct of people who are in a position where they have to appeal to people popularly, is to never admit you're wrong.
Yes.
Do you remember the when Dick Cheney shot his friend in the face on a hunting trip?
Right.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
He was probably 3 sheets to the wind.
Exactly.
Okay. But he shot a donor in the face. And there was a satire that the Daily Show did the next day. It was the best thing they ever did. And it wouldn't be as funny now because you'd have to have the full picture and context. But they basically had people on the spot reporters saying that the vice president wasn't going to admit he did anything wrong, because that would be a sign of weakness. That was the humor behind the bit. Was this repeated? Like, no, we didn't do anything wrong. He meant to shoot his friend in the face, right? We did accomplish victory in Iraq, right? This is the same thing all over again. So this isn't one party that does this. This is the constant pattern of this institution.
This is the MO of government in America.
And Peter Hotez was on that train. He was riding along. He was enjoying the celebrity he was getting out of the deal. He was selling more books by doing it. And so now he's being called upon. By the way, he's claiming he's been a death threat. This might be the beginning of the Jussie Smollett of the vaccine, pro-vaccine movement. I so doubt that actually happened. I really, really doubt it. He had one person show up with a camera asking him questions outside his home, outside his gate. He was able to lock that guy out. The guy didn't even cross the line. You might not have liked it, might not have been convenient that somebody shows up at your house, but going from there to saying you've received death threats, it just didn't happen. I'm sorry.
Not gonna happen.
Most Americans didn't know this name until this past week.
Peter Hotez?
Yeah.
But we've seen him. I mean, he's been out there, but yes, I'm
but
with
if
you
he
on that.
believes in this and he wants to restore public confidence in vaccines, then he's being given the golden opportunity. He's being given the golden ticket and he should take it. He should take it. And our show has all along, one of the things that keeps coming up as a sub-theme to it is, and we've called it having a glass of lemonade on the porch, but it is about sitting down and talking with people with whom you disagree. That keeps coming up. It's not what we're about. Okay, I want to be clear. We're about something bigger than that. But this tactic ends up being the one that we end up talking about the most. Just having a conversation. We should be having a conversation. And I will tell you that it isn't just on this subject. There are so many things where experts have told us things where they've turned out to be wrong. And almost everybody in earshot of me has had a medical experience like that, or a legal experience like that, or some other related experience like that. We have also watched our government sell influence and do things like the food pyramid. The FDA has approved drugs that subsequently ended up needing to be recalled. In this particular case, one of the things I know Bobby Kennedy's going to argue is that they didn't do the testing. They cheated on the testing of the vaccines. I mean, there's massive levels of cheating. The rigor that's normally required was completely thrown out the window. And I'm not saying a little bit, like there's things that they do specifically to improve the results in the way that they structure the tests that you would have a harder time getting away with doing under normal circumstances. And then they didn't tell us that they did those things. They told us we were safe. And that anybody who didn't take it was a bad guy. We'll deal with that another day. I don't want to get into that today. I want to say that if you actually believe yourself, Peter Hotez, you have to say yes to this debate. And for everyone in earshot, if you, I don't care which side you're on, if you're on the side that says, wait a minute, we have too much vaccine hesitancy and too much misinformation, here's a chance to put something up that clears the record and kicks the other side's butt once and for all. And if you're on this, but there's a whole nation full of people who are waiting for an apology. They're waiting for some acknowledgement that from official quarters that they were right. And for that reason, I think this would actually be a healing moment if both of these men would come and sit down. I'll tell you what I don't think will happen, Bill. I don't think they're going to get violent with each other. I don't think these two men are going to get up and start slugging it out. I think the only thing that can come out of this debate is more discussion. And the more discussion that we have of a rational nature, and that's what's being proposed here, then the quicker we can get to social healing in this country.